in my mind, it's always like, well, let's be as efficient as we can, and let's put a time limit on so they know like what to expect. But you say something different, to where you're like, let's, instead of saying, hey, we're going to rehearse 6 to 7 or 6 to 8, you would say just put.
We start at 6.
Yeah. And why is that?
Because I think what you want to do is have time to do everything. And sometimes it takes longer to work on the music.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's a mental gymnastics that people play when there's a time on something. Okay. So like even people watching this podcast, many of them have already like scrubbed forward a little bit with their cursor or their mouse, wherever they are on their phone or on their computer, to see how long this thing is,
Yeah.
Because they want to know, what am I getting myself into? Welcome back to another episode of the Worship Catalyst podcast, where we help you become a more skilled and godly leader in ministry and life. Sports and worship leading, that's what Stephen Hanley and me, Austin Ryan, we've been talking about for a few episodes now, learning things about mission and excellence and the congregation and building trust. Successful sports teams and successful athletes are amazing at all of these things, and they're amazing at also this other thing. It is practice. So we're going to be unpacking leading effective worship rehearsals, some tips on dynamic impact for the rehearsals. Now, there's this thing called practice, and there's this thing called rehearsal. Okay, so like they may be the same thing in the dictionary, but do those have two different meanings?
We're talking about practice, man.
Okay.
Not the game.
All right, Alan
Practice.
Iverson. Yeah, that's good. I love it.
Shout out to AI.
Yes.
Man, practice and rehearsal, I think the best way, simply in my mind, that I look at it is practice is what you're doing to prepare individually by yourself, so that rehearsal becomes us doing what we're doing together.
Yeah.
For the common goal of whether that's, a game or leading worship.
So practice is like a personal one-on-one kind of thing. Gotcha.
100%.
By yourself.
Right.
All right. So you see that athletes that excel at the highest levels have incredible discipline on this. Like they really work hard on their own and on their own skills. So what when you were at your peak at the high levels of golf that you attained?
Yes.
Back in the day?
Yeah. Thank you for highlighting that.
Yeah. What was the practice routine like to be good at what you did? What'd it take?
Yeah, even at like when I was at my peak in high school, even at that level, if you weren't playing golf every day, if you weren't hitting the range and the putting green every day, you were falling behind. Yeah. So if you weren't playing 9 holes, you were falling behind.
The same thing was us when I was playing tennis competitively, like really competitively for a while, for many years. We would, there were many times that we'd be on the courts for 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And sometimes we would, when school was in session, we would start in the morning with weightlifting, then do our classes, and then we would be on the courts for 2-3 hours, and then we'd get in a car and drive to another club and play against some people for 2 or 3 hours, and then go back home 10, 11 o'clock at night, studying wherever we could. Because if you were not doing that kind of schedule, you were falling behind. Yeah,
which is crazy, even at that level.
At that level.
That sounds pretty intense. And then it's like you go to the next level. Like I was looking at somebody I saw like on the PGA Tour, they posted like Tiger Woods at his prime, like his daily routine.
Oh my gosh.
And so I'm going to try to do a little bit from memory, but it was like 6:30 a.m., he's in the gym running, like he's doing cardio.
Yeah.
Then at 7:30, he's doing weights. Then at 8:30, he's on the driving range.
Did he eat yet?
He's hitting golf balls. Somewhere in there, he had breakfast.
Okay.
And then
which is probably like a burrito from McDonald's.
Yeah, I mean, Egg McMuffin, something like that. No, I mean, it was probably like, egg on salmon or something. Something really, oats and salmon. No, but then 10:30, he's on the putting green. Then he's going to play 9 holes. By 1 o'clock, he's back on the driving range. And then he's working on short game the rest of the afternoon. Then he's having another gym session, dinner, and then he said like he would play tennis or basketball, whatever it was, for fun or
just for fun.
Yeah,
because he wasn't tired enough from all that work. Right, you need to go burn off some of his energy from sitting around in the office all day.
Yeah, you're right. And now you wonder like why his knees and back is falling apart. But that's insane that like at that level, that was the type of preparation he was putting in. And I mean the results that came from that.
You know, what's interesting is I think all of the other golfers, just him specifically, like he set the pace so much in his weightlifting and his discipline that all the other golfers raised up to his level.
Yeah.
Over the years because they saw the success that he was having.
Yeah, what the gym, like, because there was that narrative that was like almost gym work weights like hurt your golf game.
Yeah.
But he was in the gym, and I mean, the results,
spoke for themselves.
I mean, he was just that much higher above everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a big deal for individual athletes, obviously. They work super hard on their own. And when they get together for rehearsals or their team practices on team sports, those kind of practices are crazy as well. And what always amazes me, like when I've been to a lot of college and a few pro football games, and I try to get there super early so I can watch the workouts. And the craziest thing to me, like in basketball, they do this too. In basketball, they shoot layups for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I'm like, layups?
Yeah.
Like this is something you learn in third grade.
Yeah.
But that's what they do in the pros because there's something about the discipline of just doing the same thing over and over and over again, the muscle memory of it 100%. And all that kind of stuff. And then in football, I was going to say, when I get there early, they're running the simplest running plays with no defense. They're just running the simplest of plays over and over and over.
They're not out there doing like, flea flickers and double reverses, practicing any of that. No. It's all the fundamental stuff.
All the fundamental stuff. And it's amazing at that level, after all the 20, 30 years of doing the same thing, that they still kind of keep focusing on those
things.
things.
I think the cool part about that is, and I think why those guys would say they do it, I mean, on the golf course is why, they practice the way that they do so that when they're in the moment, they're not worried about, the fundamentals or thinking about doing it this way or this way. They've done it so much that it's just like, it's part of them.
Yeah.
And so when they're under pressure, it just naturally happens.
Yeah.
And I think that is so applicable to what we're trying to get at with worship leading on a team. It really is, yeah. Why rehearsal is so important.
So let's get to the rehearsrsal part here in just a few minutes. But before we do, let's talk about practice.
Talking about practice.
I'm talking about practice. And so...
how many times can we throw that in?
So what we're talking about is the work you put in on your own before you even show up to your group or to your band or to your team. So why is that so important for musicians and singers and technologists even? Yeah,
I think because what we talked about a second ago is like the rehearsal aspect of it is learning how to put it together. So if you come with, you have a baseline set in your own personal practice time, and you've worked on the parts and you've worked on maybe you're running lyrics and you've typed out the lyrics. That way, when you get to rehearsal, you're learning how to do it together.
Yeah.
And there's even a creative side of that begins to happen. It's like, okay, well, this is what he's doing. Let me change my part a little bit so that it complements that. And there's more of even a beautiful thing of us coming together that was better than me by myself. But to get there, you have to know the songs.
I love those. I love those rehearsals like that where you show up and everybody's actually spent the time and you play it through first time and it's almost like, wow.
Yeah.
It feels so good.
Yeah.
And what you can say at that point is then you can go, hey guys, we know the song. Let's mess around with it a little bit and let's see if we can make it our own and put our own.
So good, man.
This is who we are as instrumentalists rather than us. Like this is that whole thing of where we just like, we don't want to just copy the way that some, elevation band or pick your band is playing it. We want it to have our stamp on it. But to get to that point, we have to be ready with the song and the way that it goes so that we can play with it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, man, so often we don't do, like, that's not what we're doing. It's like what you just described, the element of like, when we play the song, it's like, wow, that was it.
Yeah.
How often does that happen?
Yeah.
And I think that's not a, your band doesn't know how to rehearse. That's a preparation problem to the point where, you could spend hours and hours getting to that place in a rehearsal, or you could show up to that place where then there's the more power your team has to get actually creative and think through what we need to do for our congregation.
And so when you get to that place, we have rehearsal. Now, I know that there's this thing where a lot of the worship leaders that I have mentored over the last couple of years have kind of abandoned the midweek rehearsal, okay? And I think COVID did that in some degree. It accelerated that anyway. But there is definitely this sense of we want to be faithful with the time that we have, and we want to make sure people don't feel completely overtaxed and everybody's super busy and all this kind of stuff. And so there's like, if we could just squeeze it all on Sunday morning, maybe we could do that. Here's the core issue the core problem with that. Okay. Rehearsals, band rehearsals specifically for worship teams, have four things that they need to occur. Okay. One of them is we need to get the songs ready for the service. Okay. That's obvious. Everybody knows that. The second one is musical development, just becoming a better musician in general, just getting from here to here slowly over time. The third one is spiritual development. Like, we want to make sure that there are moments for people to grow in their faith. And the fourth one is relational development, connecting with one another on a deeper and deepening level, week by week, month by month, year by year.
Right.
So we got prep the songs, become a better musician, spiritual development, relationship development. And on a Sunday morning, if you've got like an hour or 2 hours, whatever you have to prep for those songs, you're not going to get those done.
No chance.
There's no chance to get all four of those done. What's going to drive it is learn songs.
Right.
And then you're going to make sure you learn the songs. And then you're going to make sure you learn the songs.
Yeah.
And you might have time for a quick prayer before the service. I mean, that's the one of the, I think, largest challenges of bands, period, church worship teams, creative arts teams, is that they do not pastor. There's no pastor moment or involvement in the people on the team.
Right.
So rehearsals fulfilled in the middle of the week fulfill all of those things.
Yeah.
Now, what I have found is because I've worked on this 100 different ways, right? And here's what I think is the best way to do it. I think the best way to do it is to do the music first.
Yeah.
Just like show up, hey everybody, glad you're here. Open your, get your guitars out, get ready. We're going to learn the songs and learn the songs. And through that, work on musical development as you're building the songs. You know, let's try this way, kind of get creative and interesting. And then that stops. And now it's time to go into spiritual development and relationship development.
And why would you do it that way versus, because I think most of the time, like what we've heard done is like, you come to rehearsal, we're going to pray together for a minute. Yeah. And then we jump into the songs. Right. Why do you do it that way?
The reason is because what people by default think and feel when they show up is we have to get these songs learned.
Right.
And so if you get that out of the way, okay, cool. Songs are learned. Now we can focus on some other things.
Right.
Whereas if you're starting with, hey, let's pray, let's open the Bible. Hey, let's really dig in. Hey, let's spend some time with some relationship building exercises and stuff. And then the back of people's minds is, okay, let's hurry up through this because we have some songs we have to learn. Yeah. Because we have to get those songs learned. You know what I mean? And so I think that's why.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's really good, man. I think that's so like counter, to what we would even lean towards at times, because maybe in our mind, we're like, we want to prioritize the time together. But I love that where it's like, that's so important, that time of spending together, learning each other, praying together, actually bearing burdens together, growing in community. But when it's kind of built around that like the hustle, where it's like, we got to get these songs done. Yeah. Then you're not, you might be short to share something or be like, nah, I don't have enough time to get into that. Yeah. Where it's like, hey, where I did that, we're just chilling. Yeah. We're relaxed, way easier to share and pray.
Okay. So how long does band practice last? Band rehearsal last?
We talking with tracks or without tracks? No. No, I think
if it's with tracks, it's like 3.75 minutes per song.
How long's the set? Because it's like a 27. We set it to a timer, so we just run it. No, I think in my mind, it's always like, well, let's be as efficient as we can, and let's put a time limit on so they know like what to expect. But you say something different, to where you're like, let's, instead of saying, hey, we're going to rehearse 6 to 7 or 6 to 8, you would say just put.
We start at 6.
Yeah. And why is that?
Because I think what you want to do is have time to do everything. And sometimes it takes longer to work on the music. Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a mental gymnastics that people play when there's a time on something. Okay. So like even people watching this podcast, many of them have already like scrubbed forward a little bit with their cursor or their mouse, wherever they are on their phone or on their computer, to see how long this thing is,
Yeah.
Because they want to know, what am I getting myself into? Mm-hmm. And so that way your brain starts to check out a little bit before it's done. Mm-hmm. It just naturally, when you get near the end, it's like, okay, we're almost done. And
We just have to get through 15 more minutes.
I just have to, we're grinding through or whatever it is, and especially this podcast.
Yeah.
You have to like, really
just get through it. Just get through it.
But there's something about not having in your mind, if you can ever get to this place where it's like, hey, we're going to be done when we're done.
Mm-hmm.
Then when you sit down after you've done the music and you sit down and you go, hey, let's open up the Bible and let's really talk. Let's see what the Spirit is saying to us as a team and individually, and let's discuss it, and let's pray for one another, and let's get to know each other and that sort of thing. And if you don't feel like there's a backstop to that, then there's just a deep breath you can take and go, hey, we're just going to linger here for a while, Now, as a leader, you obviously don't want to mandate that people are there till 2:00 in the morning because everybody has jobs or school or whatever it is. But at the same time, you just don't want that mental break that's going to take place. Like you're right in the middle of, man, here we are, like God's speaking to us, or man, we're learning about you. And we're learning about you, and we're like, we're connecting with you. Oh, it's 11 or 9 or whatever time it is. Sorry, God. Hey, God, I loved your testimony. It was starting to be really good.
Yeah.
But it's 9:00.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think we'd find too in that kind of situation is we're honestly going to be more efficient, and I think more flexible too, obviously, to the point where it's like, man, we got done with our rehearsal in 45 minutes and we feel very good with where we're at. And now like if you're in that space and you have like a time limit on it, it's like, oh, now we have like an hour and 15. What do we do for an hour and 15?
Yeah.
You're not thinking about that either. So that's like on the other side where it's like, okay, now we have just a couple minutes. So let's take it. Verse and two, what you're saying on the other end of that, like you're not worried about looking at the watch. It's just like, hey, we're going to get done what we need to get done. And then two, you find like the rhythm that works for your band. Everybody's good with 3 hours. Everybody's good with an hour. And then you start to think as a leader, okay, how do I need to best use this time?
Yeah.
But I think, putting a time limit sometimes does cut off either the creativity of the band, where we're going. And I think we could even say, how many times have we had a quiet time with the Lord or with the Bible where we haven't had a time limit? That's been some of the sweetest time with God ever.
Absolutely.
Versus like, I have 15 minutes, God.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, come on, bring it.
Bring it right now.
You need to get some good stuff going right now.
Yeah, because you got a time limit, God.
So you as a band leader, you've got a great team that you lead, Stephen, at Refuge Church. And so what do you expect out of them in terms of practice? And, not rehearsal, but when you show up at rehearsal, what do you expect that they have done really functionally and practically?
Yeah, I expect that. I think first that before you even talk about what you expect them to do, it's like, what do I expect of myself? Mm-hmm. Because what I'm doing, like if I'm expecting them to do something that I'm willing to do.
Yeah, y'all need to practice, but I'm good.
So I think, and we may get in this in a second, but I think we need to understand that we need to be the most prepared person in the room.
For sure.
All the time. And that's not like an arrogant or prideful thing. That's how I serve and lead the team.
Yeah.
If I'm going to ask them to be prepared.
One thing I've thought about that is that I need to come to rehearsal as prepared as they're going to come to Sunday.
Yeah. That's a great way to think about it. And I think from that place, if you're working on being prepared, then I think you, expect them to know the form of the songs. Mm-hmm. So you've given them resources to be able to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think too, even making notes, prior to the fact that like, hey, this is kind of where I feel like we might go with this song, making those notes even beforehand so they can know, oh, we're gonna cut that last chorus and we're gonna go into this song. So they're already thinking about those things. So I think you have to give them resources and prep them even before you get, and this is all like more from your perspective, but I think it's general that you expect them to know the form of the song, the parts well enough to the fact that they can walk in and not be so in learning it in that moment.
Right.
Because that also can create disunity even on your team with somebody who's like super prepared and then someone who's not.
So what do you do with somebody that's not prepared? How's that work?
Literally kick them
out of the team.
Kick them out. No, I think
that's the way it is in sports though. I mean, seriously, that's the way it is in sports where if somebody is not, if they're not showing up, if they're not doing the work beforehand, then they start to fall behind.
Yeah. I think before you go to like that individual, you have to make sure you're kind of just hitting it, talking about it at this level.
Yeah.
So you're sharing things like about we talked about the mission and the values.
Yeah.
And you're just talking about those things.
Yeah.
And slowly moving in that direction of seeing what is affecting that person. And if it continues to be a thing, that's when you go one-on-one and be like,
so
hey.
Did you take your church through Radical Worship Solution, your band through Radical Worship Solution?
Yeah, not with them knowing. But I've used used a lot of the principles how we formed our vision and values, and we talk about it a couple times a year.
So that you share the language. And all that.
Correct.
And so do you think that that's been a good way of setting up the guardrails for your team to kind of be on the same page?
Yeah, because I think early on in leading teams, I was really big on expectations and like saying, here are the 10 expectations. And they were really practical, which I think they were good, and it's good to have expectations. But I think it was like, learn the music, love your church well, whatever the 10 expectations were. Right. And it was like, you do this, you stay on the team. I never said that, but that was kind of what I was communicating.
Sure, right.
Versus here's the vision, and here's the values that keep us on that vision. The expectations kind of just naturally come with the value. Right. So if we're talking about being authentic and we're talking about valuing excellence, and we talk about that stuff, I don't have to sit there and be like, learn your music. Yeah. You know, sometimes you will if somebody's just really struggling. But I think if we talk about the why and how we're doing it, that stuff just is part of your language. And so that's what I've found, at least on my team, is that when we talk about the values that are keeping us on the mission, and that's going to help with your preparation as a band. And people are going to know, like people are going to recognize that stuff.
Yeah. The thing about that book, Radical Worship Solution, I think that what it creates that you found out because you use some of the principles of it and also some of the questions of it, is that it helps it helps the team come up with their own rules. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like basically a lot of worship teams have manuals with rules. Okay. But what's better is if the team can say, hey, this is how we're going to live. Because not only will they own it better because they came up with it, but also when other people come into the team, the culture is going to be so strong towards that they have to either conform to it or they have to like they're like, I can't be this. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or whatever it is. And so starting with, I love it, like the broad general conversation, the book is a good resource for that. But then if somebody after that kind of doesn't, they're just not keeping up, then that's where the private conversations probably come into play. Right?
Yeah. And I think we're really quick to want to go to the private conversation, at least me personally. Like if there's an issue, I want to address it as the leader. And just I feel that pressure sometimes as the leader is like, oh, we got to fix that. Yeah. But I think if you're preaching good mission, like a good vision and good values, then that gives you a foundation to go to that person. Yeah. Versus like if you did something wrong and you don't really even know that you did something wrong because we don't have vision and values. This goes back to another podcast that we did. Yeah. But like we can't go talk about it because it's just like, well, you didn't do that. Well, why should I do that? Yeah. And so, but if we have, hey man, we've talked about this, like what's going on? That gives you more of a like just a biblical, loving, shepherding way to step into that conversation and be like, hey, what's going on? What's happening here? I'm noticing this, and here's why. Like that's important. We've already talked about it. They get it, right? And especially if you're celebrating when somebody's doing it well. Like I think that's another part. You know, is when somebody's prepared, highlighting that. You're like, man, you worked so hard on that part this week.
You clearly practiced.
Yeah,
that was amazing. Because
you were terrible last week. Yeah. No, really, like you clearly worked so hard on that, man. Jim, thanks for just giving that extra effort this week. I just noticed it, and you do that publicly, not in a weird way, not to where it makes them uncomfortable. But I think that's super important for the team to see.
I know that one of the things we talked about in excellence was, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but I was talking to a worship leader the other day that said, I'm not sure my team is practicing that much before the service. And I said, how's the music sounding? He said, it's sounding great. And I was like, okay, why do you think they're not practicing? He goes, I don't know. They just kind of like, and I said, what kind of songs are you doing? He goes, well, we have the list and we're doing those songs. I said, they're all like pretty common worship songs. Yeah, they're common worship songs. And it came really clear to me that they didn't really have to practice to play those songs perfectly, or almost, as perfect as they were going to. Right. So it's like they could practice another 20 hours and it was going to sound the exact same. Yeah. And so there wasn't this need to get better. And so I think one thing that, like, as a leader, we need to be motivating our team to practice, not only because it's the spiritual right thing to do for our team and for God, like in the excellence thing, do the best you can with what you have, but also because we have some things out in front of us that we need to spend some extra time practicing, and getting better at what we do so that we can play this particular thing. Yeah, and I think there's a whole nother like avenue to that of like serving the church really well and also like being sensitive to the Spirit. Because man, everything with tracks and planning center and being really prepared, and we write down almost sometimes to the minute, to the second even what we're going to do. Exactly. Which I'm not saying that's necessarily bad. I love the planning aspect of things, but I think we don't just practice and prepare for the sake of practice and preparing. I think there's just a beauty in,
man, we're going to be able to be more flexible when we're prepared.
Right.
Right. So if we want to be flexible and follow the Spirit, we have to be prepared to do that. And so I think part of that challenge is, okay, like, let's learn these songs.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how we're going to do it.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, that person and that team is in such a great position because they know the music well enough that if they wanted to go somewhere else, they could.
Yeah.
And I think that's not that hard of a shift, but it's just a mindset thing that you're preaching. It's like, man, we're working really hard on this, not so we can just play these songs perfectly, but that we can lead well. And if God's like, hey, we need to sing that song right now. Like, are you ready to do that?
Yeah.
And I think that's the goal that we want to be at as a team with our preparedness and readiness. And that's why we rehearse, so that when the Lord does something,
Amen,
we're ready to follow him.
We can write the Holy Spirit in on a planning center.
That's right. Just
give him 1 minute and 32 seconds or something like that.
Yeah, it comes on the back screen. Holy Spirit time. Great.
All right. Well, practice on our own is really important.
Yeah.
Just like in sports, they gotta bring it, man. And then rehearsal when you're together doing the things. And those are hopefully some tips for you to get better at what you do on that. And I want to say, as always, we are thankful that you are joining us on the Worship Catalyst podcast. And thanks for being here for this episode. Our prayer is that you are growing in your ability to lead and are having a really good time doing it, hopefully. If this podcast has been helpful to you, consider supporting another leader that you know by passing this link on, or this podcast on, to him or to her. You never know what difference that might make in their life and ministry. All right, 2 weeks from now, we'll be back with another episode, Overcoming Obstacles. Have you ever had any obstacles in worship ministry?
More than we probably can count.
More obstacles than not obstacles.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? More problems. So we're going to talk about strategies for handling worship service setbacks. I look forward to that. So, Stephen, worship service setbacks. These are going to be good. You got 1 million of them on YouTube. You can go search. We're going to talk about what to do when they happen. See you next time.